folder.
Good evening and welcome to the December 10th, 2019 Gilman Central School District Board of Education meeting. Will you all please silence your cell phones and rise for the pledge? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First on the agenda, we have the high school student rep.
Hi. So the tagging that student government is hosting was this Friday and is moved to January. And the Global Impact Challenge will be proposing a project to No Barriers on December 20th, and the project is on mental health and disabilities. All I have.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we have the showcase of students, the varsity field hockey team.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Rivera. I am so pleased to have a full house tonight. All dressed in Guilderland gear. We have with us tonight, I guess I'll start with Regan Johnson, our athletic director, who will introduce, I believe, Jen Sykes, our amazing coach, and our championship Section 2 field hockey team. Yay!
Want to come up? Come on, stand up.
Stand up. Come on.
So, 3 years ago, we hired Coach Sykes here, and for a long time we've been talking about we've wanted to change the culture in our field hockey program, and when we hired Coach Sykes, it really took 3 years to make that happen. Actually, less than that, but to have success on the field. We've always had great field hockey players, but we put it together this year. They had an amazing run. They started off a little bit slow, trying to find their way and work together, and then they put together like 10 or 11? 10 in a row. Winning the Section 2 championship and then winning the regional semifinals. And unfortunately, they lost in the regional final to the eventual state champion from Maine Endwell High School, but gave them a great game, and we're super, super proud of them. I also want to recognize Haley Marini, who is our JV coach, and Coach Marini, former student athlete and Lady Dutch alum, and a terrific young coach, and we're super excited to have her on board. But super excited to recognize the ladies tonight. A great team on and off. They're Scholar Athlete team as well, Section 2 champions, regional finalists, and couldn't be prouder of our young ladies and our coaching staff. So I'd like to thank their parents for raising such great young ladies. And, you know, Coach Sykes and I talked all the time throughout the year about how nice a group it was, how well they got along, and it was very evident when you watched them play because they never once got on each other. It was always a supportive atmosphere, and they got what they deserved. So super proud. Congratulations. Also wanted to recognize Mr. McCoy, who's here tonight. Thanks, Dan, for coming. Albany County representative, who's going to give our girls a certificate. We're going to take a picture when we're all done here, if that's okay.
Of course.
So Dan, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. What politician doesn't want to say that?
I wasn't going to say that.
Do I have to use the microphone?
You do. Yes.
Can I take it off the hook?
Sure.
I don't want. I really want to look at you. So no offense to everyone here, to the coach and to the team. What a great championship. I mean, to go in the third seed, you beat the number 1 seed, and you move on, and you have the best record, right? I heard since field hockey's been here. Is that true? Are you sure? Are you sure? You know, I always tell everyone it's the experience that you get working as a team. You know, it's the memories that you're going to make here, and especially winning the championship and moving forward. It's what you're going to think about later on in life, and you're going to reflect back on it. And trust me, because I have some brother-in-laws that went back-to-back 13-year-old champions, and they still talk about it like, and they're a lot older than you, and they still talk about it like it was yesterday. And but it's the memories you make on the field, but it's the foundation you get at the school, and it's a great school. But I have to tell you, I got my steps in coming in from the front. I got lost, thank God for the janitor, and I still got lost again. But it's a tough school to navigate. But I do want to say to you and to your parents, thank you. Thank you to the parents for taking you to practices, picking you up, dealing with you, cleaning your uniform, making sure you have your equipment, and when you forget your equipment, showing up on the sidelines and handing it to you quietly so the coach doesn't get mad at you. Am I off? Nah, I didn't think so, right? So let's give applause to the parents. Thank you. Coach, I have certificates on behalf of Albany County to give to you, to go to the girls, but I do want to say congratulations on your leadership and being an inspiration to the team. And I always like to use the word cohesiveness, right, at this type of organization. It starts at the top, and it goes to the kids, and for them to follow in your footsteps and listen. Look, they're all like, yeah. Did she yell at you a lot? I don't believe any. So, but it does start at the top, Coach. And thank you for inspiring the next generation. And remember this: who's graduating this year?
2 men.
2 men. Wow. They look young. I'm looking very old. But anyway, congratulations. Are you going to play in college? Club. All right, that's cool. Club. All right. So, all right. Nice. Congratulations. But again, thank you, and for highlighting Albany County and showcasing not just a great high school, but great sportsmanship. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I didn't know I had to say a few words, but thank you to the Board of Education for having us here. What a nice way to get us back together. We kind of end the season and you either go out as a state champion or unfortunately go out with a loss, and we lost to the state champions. But, and you know, Mr. Johnson and I were saying, like, when are we going to get back together? You know, we have the banquet, we have a few special occasions. So this is really amazing to get the girls back together and see us back together. And we got our new section championship T-shirts just to wear for the event. And I couldn't be more proud. And if the girls turn around really quick, it kind of shows what we talked about. And when we were really struggling to get everything going, we came up with the comeback is greater, always stronger, or greater than the setback. So I think it's just plays into life as well. Sports, I think, a lot of times mimic life, and, sometimes you're down, but you're never out. And the run they went on to win 10 games in a row and defeat teams we've never defeated before, and to then take Bethlehem into double overtime and semifinals and win in sudden victory, and then to take Shenendehowa into double overtime, sudden victory in the sectional finals. And, it concluded with me running and almost tackling Regan because I was so excited. But I was so proud of them, and it was quite a very special run. And, I'm just couldn't be more proud as their coach. So thank you.
Quick pick.
Can we do a picture?
Quick pick. Yep.
Picture with the team?
I almost forgot to mention this, but Coach Sykes was named the Section 2 Field Hockey Coach of the Year. So.
You did not want me to say that, but I'm saying it anyway.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We're going to do a quick picture. We're taking the superintendent also.
Yeah, let's, I think we should all.
We could surround you if you want it that way.
You're going up. Picture night after all.
We're not board members, we're administration. Okay.
This line over here to be the end, and this over here to be the end. So I need everybody to squeeze in. Okay? Okay. I'm going to ask for just to look here, and then I'm going to move out of the way so everyone can get the appropriate picture. Everybody happy? All right. What do we say? What do you say when you get all revved up and psyched for a game? Yeah, I think champions do. Let's go. On three. 1, 2, 3. Champions. Perfect. I'm going to step out. Stay right there. I'm going to help you take the picture with the center. Go in. One more.
You gotta get in here.
All those people, and I didn't even realize you weren't in there. Okay. All right, let's do this again. What do we say on 3? 1, 2, 3. Champions. All right, I'm good. Thank you.
I was very impressed. I have nothing, so I was really impressed.
I think we'll do public comment next, and then we'll take a 2-minute break, so if everybody here who's presenting wants to leave, or if you want to stay for the regular board meeting, you're welcome to. Usually people don't. If you'd like to, so next is public comment. We have several people signed up. Let me just remind each speaker that they have 3 to 5 minutes. First is Haley Marini.
Hello. I just want to start off by thanking the board for taking their time and continuing to look into the potential of a multi-sport turf field for the departments of physical education, athletics, and the community. My name is Haley Marini, and I'm a former student and alumni of Guilderland who has been a part of the field hockey program both as a student athlete and now as a JV coach. I have first-handedly experienced the struggles and dangers of playing on grass for this sport and others. As a player who had the goal of playing in college, I had to find other ways of improving my skills to get to that level to be able to compete with the other girls who had the opportunity to play their high school careers on that surface. I went on to play D3 field hockey at the University of Scranton and began to see huge development in my skills and the ability to grow as a player once consistently playing on this surface. Now as a coach, I have seen the successes and differences in the development of the JV and varsity girls within 1 year, from last season only playing on turf a handful of times to this season renting turf full time. The skills necessary to pursue their goals of improving as a player, potentially playing in college, and competing against the 5 out of 8 field hockey teams in the sections who do have turf. Turf is vital. This is not only applicable to field hockey, but also soccer, lacrosse, and football. Secondly, safety is a huge concern when it comes to playing on grass. Unpredictability of the ball on grass from unleveled surfaces and field conditions after weather causes an increase in injuries, compared to turf, which has an even playing surface and is less impacted by weather. I know we have definitely experienced this at other schools with unpredictability of ball travel and slippery field conditions after it had rained, even causing to cancellations and rescheduling of a lot of games. Shenango conducted a 5-year independent study of high school football that showed compared to natural grass, turf had 55% fewer neural injuries, 38% fewer third-degree injuries, 45% less time lost to long-term injuries, and 35% time lost to short-term injuries. Obviously, no sport will ever be completely injury-free, but there are ways to reducing the risk and severity of the injuries once by playing on this surface. Lastly, being a student who loved participating in PE and becoming an athlete, especially outdoor units and activities, this would be very beneficial for all high school PE classes by being able to extend outdoor units both in the fall and to get outside earlier in the spring. It creates an additional teaching space for the PE teachers that they can feel their students are safe while participating in their class. It also creates a cohesive culture of students coming together to see each other's games and something that will bring pride to this school and community. Thank you again for your time.
Next, we have Sean Mooney.
Hi, good evening. I'm Sean Mooney. My daughter played on the varsity team. Just want to take a second to say thank you for your time tonight. And I'm looking at this from the perspective of a father, but also a coach. I coached at another school, and the turf and the outside I'll get into here. So as a student here, she's outside for 3 sports. She does field hockey, then she does cross-country skiing, and then she does lacrosse in the spring. As part of the field hockey team, the one that won the sectional title, as a 4-year player, I got to witness the difference between the grass and then being on the turf. As a freshman, they went up to Shenandoah. After playing them here, they lost like 3 or 4-0 here. They went up to Shen and played on the turf. And our girls were like they were playing a different game. They lost 20-0 as freshmen. So the next 3 years, as we got more and more turf time, you can see the difference. We went into overtime with them last year, and then this year we went into overtime, but now we're the sectional champs because we were able to get on turf for the whole season this year. In the winter, she does the cross-country skiing. You know, you can see right now we get the snow. It's roads. They can't run on the roads. They're danger. So they run in the parking lots. If there was an outside turf field, it could be cleaned off. They can do all their conditioning, training on the turf field, reducing the injuries in the cross-country skiing. And then just in the spring, she plays lacrosse. So you know how there is you got to wait for the snow to melt. Then you got to wait for the ground to thaw out. By the time you get outside here, it's mid-April, maybe almost May before you're outside consistently, where teams like Shen, Boston Spa, Mohanison, they're all outside March 1st, as soon as the season starts, putting our girls at a huge disadvantage just to be competitive. So just for that reason alone, it'd be nice to be outside. As a coach, being outside in the spring when you're standing in the mud, and then just the field surface is not safe. There's a lot more injuries and things like that. And then in terms of the schools, you have 15 schools right now in section 2 that are Class A. 9 of them have turf. There's 3 more that are getting them, including Bethlehem, which is getting in the next 3 or 4 years. And it's putting us further behind in terms of the competitive advantage. And then just quick numbers-wise, when you look at all the schools, or our school here, you have 8 team sports that could possibly use that field. When you're looking at fall, the winter, and then the spring seasons, that's about 400 athletes or more. Plus, as Coach Marini had said, you then also have another teaching spot for physical education in that. So these are the benefits just to our student athlete population and the students themselves. So it'd be in the best interest of the school for safety and competitive just competitively to be able to get the turf here in Gilliland in the next few years. But thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have John Wemple.
Good evening, I'm John Wemple, I reside on Kingston Lane here in the town. First, thank you to the board and the administration and teachers and staff for your meeting and ongoing response to the rest of the district experience just before Thanksgiving. It means a lot. But I'm here to speak on the turf as well. I'm a lifelong resident of the town of Guilderland, a Guilderland graduate in 1989, and varsity lacrosse alumnus. I'm also a father and a coach with Guilderland Youth Lacrosse, where I currently serve as the president of the board of directors. I'm here this evening to voice my complete support for the prospect of installing a turf field at the high school, and as a homeowner, accept and acknowledge this may have an impact on my school taxes. The benefits are too numerous for me to think otherwise. So today's synthetic turf is safe and resilient in becoming more the norm than the exception in Section 2 for schools of our size. As the parent of an elementary school child, I see it as a move that would immediately benefit current students, wonderful ladies behind us, but also as an investment in the future of our education classes and scholastic sports as a whole. Synthetic turf allows outdoor activity when grass does not. It provides a more true surface, literally leveling the playing field for our scholastic athletes. While I fondly recall my playing days here at Guilderland under the guidance of people like Russ Ferris, Dan DePersis, and John Hoteling, I also recall practicing in the same parking lots in muddy fields Coach McConaughey faces every spring. And with the wet weather that we continue to see every spring, I think it's getting worse and worse. Not only is it an inconvenience, it's also unsafe, and it puts our players at a deficit. I urge the school board to take up this item as you prepare for your upcoming budget, and if it makes its way to the ballot, I will make every effort as a father and as a lacrosse parent to make possible to see that the item gets passed. That's all I have. Ms. Marini did such a fantastic job that it's tough act to follow. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Troy Miller.
Hi, my name's Troy Miller. I graduated Guilderland in 1991. When I look back at my career here, I think if I didn't have sports, I never would have been able to have the opportunity to probably even get through high school. The work that the coaches put in with me really helped me with learning leadership and things that now I'm able to utilize as a business owner here in Guilderland. My son, part of the lacrosse program, has also received lots of help. These coaches have a lot of power with them as far as getting schoolwork done and these things. So when I think of sports, I really think of how closely it integrates with academics. And my daughter is also, she's in 7th grade with the field hockey team. And I just want her to have the ultimate experience and opportunity like a lot of the other schools have. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. And last, we have Wade Cotton. Sorry.
Good evening, Dr. Wiles and the rest of the school board. My name is Wade Cohen. I've been a Gilliland resident for the past 25 years. When we were making a decision to move to the area, we did not yet have children. But again, even at that time, the quality and ranking of the Gilliland School District was a deciding factor for us. We have since raised 3 children in the district. My son Joshua graduated last year from the high school, and my daughters Jessica and Julia, both of which are on this history-making team, are still in the high school. I think we can all agree that we all have an obligation to our kids in the district and our children as well to provide not only the best quality education we can, but to provide the best high school experience that we can offer. And I think school sports plays a determining factor in this. I'd like to share a short story with you all. As my daughter, making the transition from 5th grade to the middle school of 6th grade, had a difficult time. And to that means I say it was easy for her in the elementary school, but not so much in the middle school. She had trouble meeting new friends. She did not enjoy going to school, and as a result, her grades suffered. My older daughter, Jessie, was playing field hockey at the time, and she suggested to Julia to try it out. I picked her up that final day of tryouts. We sat in the car with that envelope in hand for about 5 minutes. And I told her, what is the matter? Open the envelope. You did your best. Let's find out. She said, Dad, I really want to be a part of this team. I want to belong. I like these girls. They like me. And I want to be part of something bigger than myself. Suffice to say, she made the team. From that day forward, she immediately excelled on and off the field. And by off the field, I mean she excelled in the classroom. She enjoyed going to school. She felt like she was part of something. She had a friend group that continues to be her friend and support group to this day. And most importantly, her grades soared. I share that story because high school sports matter, not just for the participants, but they matter for the school body and the town as well. This team has made history. And I want to go back to my daughter's 7th grade team because they were not good. No offense. They were not competitive against the suburban council teams we faced. And it wasn't just the 7th grade team, but it was the field hockey program as a whole. So what changed? In 2017, thanks to Dr. Wiles, the school board, and our athletic director, Regan Johnson, we went out and hired the best women's field hockey coach in the Capital District, Coach Jennifer Sykes. And she got the deserving recognition this year as being named the Times Union Coach of the Year. But not only that, 4 of our girls, for the first time ever, were named to the Times Union All-Star team as well. We had the coaching, we had the talent, but what was missing? In my opinion, our turf field was missing. If we want to compete on turf, we have to play and practice on turf. This year, our booster club, as well as Coach Sykes, made an unprecedented move. We weren't going to practice at the Gilliland Fields. We could not get enough practice time. We could not compete. We moved to Aframs at our own expense. The learning curve was great. We started off the season 2-7, but the girls persevered. They believed in the coach. They worked hard and rolled off 10 straight wins. Not only reaching the Section 2 game, or Section 2 final game for the first time in our history, we also beat Team X for the second time in the season and brought home the crown. And we all know who Team X is. As icing on the cake, we went out and played our first regional game, which was also on turf. And had we not played on turf all year, the regional game would have had a different outcome. But it didn't. We won that as well. We reached the final 8 in the state. These girls had a remarkable season. They brought accolades to themselves, the school, and the town. And it's that type of recognition that they deserve. Both of my daughters, Jessie and Julia, played on that history-making team. And next spring, Jessie will graduate as a 12-season athlete.
The success they had this season with their field hockey family has strengthened them as students, provided them an identity, filled them with lifelong memories and friends, and created an unbridled school spirit that will last well beyond graduation. My wish and desire is to see the rest of our teams and athletes be able to compete and succeed at this same level. And I believe we need the turf field to do that. We have already heard tonight many valid and convincing arguments as to the undeniable value for a sports turf field in the areas of increased safety for our athletes, which should and always is a primary concern. Lower ongoing maintenance costs when compared to the maintenance of a turf or a grass field. Increased practice time, which makes our teams better. And leveling the playing field against the majority of our suburban council opponents. Now I want the school board to recognize the added long-term benefit that a turf field will offer GHS and our students in increased sports programs participation, increased student and townwide support, increased school spirit, increased attendance, and in my opinion, resulting in better grades for the school population as a whole. In closing, we always tell our kids, be the best they can be, whether it's at home, in school, or on the field. Let's make a decision tonight to show that we have their backs and provide them with the right tools to be competitive, successful, and to actually be the best they can be, as these girls were this year. Let's strive to be and provide the all-around best high school experience in the Capital District. Thank you for your time and consideration. Go Dutch.
Thank you all for coming tonight. I know that this topic will be discussed when we talk about budget priorities. We'll take a 3-minute break before we let Neil start the budget projection. You guys want to stay for the meeting? You're welcome to stay.
I'm leaving too.
You don't know what we're going to talk?
We have an extra.
Can you just pull that, get into the hot and heavy part? Thank you.
Well, that's right.
Be persistent.
Pale in comparison to the celebration we just witnessed with the field hockey. We'll make a go of it anyway. Thank you. This evening, we're going to talk about rollover budget projection. We typically do that at this time of the year. I will start by saying that we don't have good, precise data to create accurate predictions of where we might be in terms of a rollover budget, but we do have some data that we can use to try to at least come close to what the situation might be given certain factors. So we'll walk through that process of how to develop a rollover budget, which essentially is going to carry us forward as we go through our budget development process. So first of all, what is a rollover budget? Well, we're assuming certain things. We're assuming that all staffing and programs are going to remain in place. We haven't had any discussions about staffing changes. We haven't had any discussions about potential program changes. So for this purpose, we're just going to assume everything's going to continue as is. The next thing that we want to do is be able to project revenue and expenses, and we do that using known data when it's available, or that which can be reasonably anticipated and is available at the time. And then finally, we will look toward trending of historical data or other information that we have from outside sources that can help us provide a basis for determining estimates at this point in time. So things like historical data, we have BOCES services that we purchase every year. So we would look at past years of BOCES services, and for purposes of a rollover budget, we could project, is that trending upward a little bit? Is it trending down, or is it staying relatively flat? In terms of outside organizations, each year we get a notification from the retirement systems, both the employees' retirement system and the teachers' retirement system, of what they're looking at in terms of projected percentages of salaries for contributions from school districts. So we're able to use that data to help with this process as well. And those are just a couple of examples. So in performing the rollover budget, we have some information about where we might stand at this point in time. Again, a very crude analysis because we just don't have a lot of good data to work with at this point. But if I perform the rollover, right now I'm looking at an expenditure increase of $2.7 million, a revenue decrease of about $730,000. That would equate to a tax levy increase of $3.4 million, the amount of taxes we would need to raise. We're projecting at this early stage a maximum tax levy growth factor of 1.6 million, so that's the tax cap component. So with a tax levy increase of 3.4 million and our maximum growth in the tax levy of 1.6 million, that leads us to the conclusion that we would need to have budget reductions or revenue increases totaling 1.8 million to remain under the tax levy limit threshold. And again, that threshold merely states that if we're under the threshold, we need 50% of the voters to have a passed budget. If we're over the threshold, we would need a supermajority or 60% voter approval to have a passed budget. Looking at the expenditure side, again, an analysis here, salaries, projecting those forward, about $1,960,000. Benefits, which include health insurance, workers' compensation, unemployment, retirement system contributions, and the like, almost $1.9 million. We're looking at a decrease of about $320,000 for equipment, supplies, and textbooks. The majority of that decrease is related to textbooks. In this current budget, we have new textbook purchases of math at the elementary level and social studies at the middle school level. We were able to make those purchases we had to increase this year's budget to make those purchases. We've made those purchases in the current year, so we're able to take that money back out of the budget again. We have contracted and BOCES services, estimated increase about $173,000. And then finally, our debt service and fund transfer line, we have that decreasing by just over $1 million. So we do have some debt rolling off. This goes back to the 2006 middle school borrowing for improvements to that building. So we're at the end of our debt payments. We had a half a payment in the current year, and then rolling forward to next year, that half payment becomes zero. And that accounts for the reduction there. In terms of revenue, we're looking at a reduction in state aid of $620,000. That is primarily due to not having any more debt for the middle school project. So as we have debt for capital construction, we also have state aid for capital construction. They're tied together. So when the debt goes away, the corresponding aid will go away as well. In terms of some miscellaneous revenues, we're looking at a reduction overall of $110,000 there. That's due to some rents that we anticipated in the current year, did not get, and will not have again next year, as well as a reduction in our investment earnings. So even though the stock market is doing well, as a school district, we can't invest in the stock market, so we have to invest in very safe securities. This ties more to the Federal Reserve rate, which has been lowered 3 times. So we're down at that very low level of what you might get on your personal savings account at the bank. We've seen those interest rates go down in terms of the money that we can safely invest. In terms of appropriation of reserves and fund balance, there's no change anticipated at this point in time. You have to talk a little bit about the state picture because that influences the local picture here for school districts. Just came out recently, mid-year update to the New York State budget, that in 2020 there's a prediction of a substantial budget deficit of $6.1 billion. Most of that appears to be due to rising Medicaid costs, $4 billion of that. And this is the largest state deficit since the 2010 recession. So the state right now is looking at a pretty dire picture in terms of their outlook for next year. There also has been some roundtables and public hearings occurring regarding foundation aid. And foundation aid is what school districts receive based on the number of pupils that they have. So it's termed as sound basic education, was determined by New York State a while ago as what level of financial support should follow each student in New York State. And there was a plan to fund that over time. That plan evaporated as financial difficulties came into play. It's back on again. The New York State Senate has held 6 roundtables across the state, not in the capital region, though. They've held 1 public hearing, and the goal is to provide further insight to advance a more equitable distribution of state funds in order to deliver a quality education for all New York families. And we're still tracking the foundation aid, and if the original formula were in play and funded as it was intended, we are still owed $4.6 million from the failure to implement that as it was designed. So with a deficit like this, what are our choices? What do we have to look at? How do we balance that out? Obviously, programs and staffing, they're the meat and potatoes of what we do in the school district. Obviously, that's where most of the money is. That's certainly where we would have to look. State aid, we don't know what that is going to look like yet. We won't have knowledge of that until the governor presents his executive budget proposal in mid-January, and then we'll get some indication as to what kind of state aid we might be looking at. And then finally, we need to talk a little bit about our savings, our fund balance and reserves. We do have them available. They can be used to help offset expenses, so to balance out the revenue side. So even though we have expenditures, if we don't have additional state aid or to not tax as much, we can dip into our savings and apply that as well. Just have to remind the board that we're already committed to using out of our fund balance $849,500. So there already is a pretty hefty draw on that already on an annual basis. And with that, I can take any questions that anybody might have. Yes, Sean.
I'll realize that you don't know the answers to this, that's okay. For salaries currently, are all of our lines filled, or do we have a number of vacant lines that remain open?
Probably Lynn could address that. You mean open positions? Let Lynn address that.
We still have a couple teaching assistant positions that we're trying to fill. But other than that, most all of our positions are filled. We've got a maintenance position we're still looking for. We're looking for an auto mechanic. So some of those positions are open, but we're hoping to fill those.
But we're pretty much maximizing every staff line.
I would say so, with the exception of a couple teaching assistants that we still are trying to fill, and just a couple vacant positions that are not expected to remain vacant. I would say, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Sue.
Neil, when do you predict you'll have better data from the state?
The first information we're going to have from the state is the release of the executive budget proposal in mid-January. They won't release any information sooner than that time.
Thank you. Other questions?
Yeah.
Judy?
I saw today that the regents were going to request an extra $2 billion for state aid. That just, I mean, I know they request every year, but that just seems bizarre almost in the light of $4 billion.
Yeah, I don't know that they approached it with the intent of looking at what the state budget deficit was. I think they look at it purely from what do we need to fund education adequately. That's been the historical proposal. Each year they come and make a proposal, and it's something along those lines.
Would be nice.
It would be very nice. Any other questions? Okay, I have one more slide. I just want to talk about where do we go from here. So our next steps in the process, as we just talked about, the executive budget proposal, we expect that to be in mid-January. We are continuing our budget meetings with all staff members, all administrators and departments. As always, we're seeking community input, so at any time in the budget process, you don't need to wait till a special time. You want to provide input into the budget process, you can contact us at the district office. There's also usually some legislative advocacy efforts that will be undertaken, and that will start around that time when we see what the state is looking to provide school districts in terms of aid. And then finally, we are ultimately working toward a draft budget proposal that we'll release on March 3rd, known as the superintendent's draft budget. So that will be the entire budget, the first opportunity to look at that. We still won't have final state aid information, but we do start that process in time to have plenty of conversation to set ourselves up so that when the state legislature adopts a budget, we know what our final state aid information is. We have a context in which to develop the budget and make adjustments at that point.
Just one of, and this was, I was thinking of this. When we get our next update on this, when we talk about expenditure changes like salary, can you give us an idea what % change that is year over year for that particular line?
Sure.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Next, we have board direction for budget development. And the first is the thought exchange results. Dr. Wiles, did you want to do that part?
You actually have a hard copy of the thought exchange
Yep.
results at your seat. So there's two pieces. First looks like this. It's the response to the two survey questions. And then it's a nice segue from the presentation that Neil just made. It references both the tax cap and the use of fund balance and reserves. So each year we ask the board members, so under what circumstances would you be comfortable challenging the tax cap? We have never done that here in Guilderland. And so you can see that of your responses, we had 25% of you said, under no circumstances should we be considering challenging the tax cap. But the next two are the highest I've ever seen from this group, and that is 42% of you indicated that if our current programs could not otherwise be funded, you would consider challenging that tax cap. And 33% of you, which is 3, said if there were newly identified needs that we could not otherwise be funded. So that is a departure from where we've been in the past. It's usually been a pretty strong no, we're not comfortable looking at that. So we will keep that in advisement as we work through the process. The other question that we asked was, in general, what is your recommendation regarding the use of fund balance as a revenue source for the 2020-2021 school budget? As Neil just mentioned, we are using $849,500 of fund balance this year to offset expenses. And so the question was none. 34, so about 3 of you said we shouldn't be using any fund balance next year. 3 of you said as little as possible. And 3 of you said same as the current year. So I don't know what to say to that, except we'll kind of see how things unfold. But the understanding is, and I think Neil made this point, that if we use no fund balance going forward, then we need to make up the $849,000 that we're using this year from a different revenue source to fill that hole. So that's kind of how fund balance works. Once you start using it, you need to depend on it. Otherwise, you need to find another revenue source. The other document I shared with you is just a printed copy of the top thoughts from your thought exchange. So you have it as a reference for your discussion around some of the ideas that you may have for priorities for the upcoming school year. I will leave it at that unless there's other questions.
Neil, how can we have a fund balance if we rely on it every year?
Well, we have enough that we don't exhaust it all, and then through the annual budget process, we also are able to replenish that. So if we have a good year and we have less expenditures than anticipated and or more revenue than anticipated, we can backfill what we're using. Take out and add back.
So next we'll do the board input on budget priorities. In the past, we've gone around, we've given everyone an opportunity to share their input on the budget, so we'll do the same.
Barb wasn't here tonight, but she emailed me her comments, so we could go on to the next item without sharing her ideas also. So do you want to start, Ben, and then we'll go around and I'll end?
Okay. So I think you all know where my priorities lie, primarily in the areas of creating a direction for the district. I was talking with Sean a little bit before this meeting. Marie's going to present a budget based on the needs of the district, and then we're going to fiddle with the edges of it, sticking one thing in and taking one thing out. But what do we put in and what do we take out? I mean, we're instead of talking about what we want, we might have to start talking about what do we want to get rid of. And it's very hard to make those decisions unless we know what direction we're going in as a school district. Do we replace the turf fields, or do we expand enrichment options? One of the things I listed was visioning. Whether we need to spend money on that or not, I won't get into. But then a lot of things that I agreed with were maintaining our facilities. There's a high school thought exchange that has been floating around for months, that hasn't really been published yet, but the students talk a lot about the conditions of our schools, rodents, leaking roofs, bad plumbing, cold classrooms. Kids should be comfortable in school, otherwise they can't learn and they don't want to be here. And that's not conducive to building a kind of culture and community that we want. So I'll also mention that I was one of the 3 people to vote for going past the tax cap, because I think our limit this year is like 1.8%, because that's what inflation is. And I don't really see a big difference between 1.79% and 1.81%. Our budget's usually passed with over 70% support. So if we needed to up it a little bit, it's kind of like when you're driving on a road and there's those lines and you stay in between your lines, but those lines are just in your head. You can drive right over them. So we have this fixed line in our heads of 2%, 2%. There's no magic number there. The governor just threw that out there and made it permanent. We don't necessarily need to follow it. So I guess that's it.
I agree with Ben. I think visioning, and I'm not sure what the expense is, but I think it's an important part of what we should be considering for the district. Hopefully, it's not a huge expense, because I think we're going to be in tough shape this year. The item that's listed first here, playgrounds, I just want to say I've been representing, I've gone the board at 2 different elementary schools in the last month or so, and parents are very concerned about the playgrounds. And if we could combine it with the athletic fields, I think that would be wonderful, but I think that it is something that we need to keep in our thoughts, that this is really important to the community. As far, well, I don't want to say it's just the people, who come to the meetings, but it is important to the people that I've heard from about how important it is to them and to the children. A couple of other things that I noticed when I was reading this, when it was on the computer at home, mental health support, and hopefully that we have that program now that we're getting into at the middle school, right? That's going?
Our clinic is full.
Okay. Oh, so we need more.
We're actually talking about
Okay.
potentially having another clinic at the high school.
If it's full, that means it's been necessary and worthwhile, and I do support it. I'd love to see more teaching assistants, but listening to Lynn say we still haven't been able to have, we're still looking for 2. I don't think that's realistic. I know what a huge difference it makes to kids to have a teaching assistant and to the teachers in the room. But I think what we really have to do is keep as close to we can. It sounds like we're going to have a tough budget year, and I don't like to go into too much new cost. So I'll just leave it at those.
We'll go last, Tim.
Okay, sure. First of all, Ben, leave before me tonight because I don't want to be on the road when you're out there, if you're going to be swerving all over the place. So just want to throw that out there. Stay in your lane. That's a big saying these days. I like the thought exchange approach. We had not done this before. I thought this was very useful. I don't have a lot of big prepared comments because I think we have such a good list here. I would just as soon use this as our kind of guideposts for the rest of our discussion. There's a lot on here. I would say a lot of real good meat and potatoes items. I don't know if there's a way that we could ever go back to this and open it up again so that maybe we can go through. I don't think a lot of items got considered because, I mean, I know I put mine on probably the 3rd, December 3rd, so they probably weren't seen. They'll probably rank low anyway, but that's okay. But it might be nice just to see another ranking, and then you kind of filter through and get the cream's going to rise to the top, or the common ideas are going to rise to the top, and I would be comfortable looking at those then as the areas to focus on. I would echo the mental health one seems to be emerging as a big concern. So I just like that we have this list. I found this to be very valuable. I could never get it to load in the program here, but this is good to have the hard copy now. So, yeah, I mean, it's. I'd be curious what other people think, but I'd just be curious to see if maybe there was a bump up in ratings for certain things and a little reshuffle, and maybe as we hear more from the public and the community on items that definitely affects your thinking. I mean, I know what I heard tonight. I'm going to certainly process that through a lot more and have a lot more thought on the turf field aspect. So, the more info you get, the more these priorities or these focus items are going to shift around and change. So, just as an idea.
To open it up again, because we're getting more input, and
Yeah.
Comments we hear via email or the public at the meetings are not necessarily on the thought exchange, but if we're looking at that document to kind of consolidate our thoughts, then probably would be good to open it up and do that. Sean?
Thank you. I think, going back, somebody, sort of give you my accountability here, and I believe because it's, you do a thought exchange, and I think what I said is that in terms of exceeding the tax cap, I said if our current programs cannot otherwise be funded, I think that's a reasonable option. Let me tell you why I believe that. I don't think that the tax cap is meant to be a hard and fixed barrier that we can never cross. What I do think is that it was put in place to put the burden back on us as board members and stewards of the district to make the case to the public why we need to go above and beyond what most everybody else sees as just an annual adjustment to their cost of living, whether it be their jobs or the revenue or the dividends that they're getting in their pension funds or investments or so on. So I don't think it's a hard barrier, but I think we have a tremendous responsibility to be deliberate in those discussions and making that case moving forward to the public. In terms of the budget, I think I sort of divided my priorities into 2 areas. I think first for the annual operating budget, sticking to operating and program expenses, I think has to come in first and foremost. And I'll tell you why I wouldn't put playgrounds in there next. I think long-term capital investment should be paid over the long term. It's a matter of equity to me, to taxpayers. And actually, let me rephrase and not call our constituents or our fellow neighbors taxpayers. We're shareholders. We're making a tremendous investment in this community, and I think that we have to be aware of that. So when it comes to items like a turf field,
like playgrounds, and I gotta say that I think it's unfortunate that the families in Westmere have a sneaker drive going on right now to fund a playground. I think we have got to make a better case and moving that forward with the voters, because I think that's just it's frustrating to me to see that's how a community like Guilderland is going to build a playground, is off of recycling sneakers. So I think moving those capital expenses off to the side, out of this operating budget, I think is going to be a critical look that I have. And again, because capital expenses, turf fields, classrooms, labs are not a one-year expense. They're investments into the future. And I think about the young ladies that were here today with the field hockey team, and that we as a school board need to make investments that give our students a reason to go on, be the best person they can, but at the end of the day, want to come back and live here and raise their families here and not leave here because of our schools. And so that's my thinking going into this. Thank you.
I think like all of us, my priority would be to support the needs of the students of the district. My personal emphasis would be on supporting the social emotional development of our students. And toward that end, like other people have already said, I think we need to support the mental health demands that, you know, the 21st century is really showing us. We know that mental health provisions can help reduce injury in students. We know it can help reduce violence. And also toward that end, playgrounds, like the importance of play in helping reduce the mental health burden, as well as the importance of sleep in our high school students and supporting a later school start time. All of those sort of themes work towards building the social emotional development of students. So that would be something that would be my personal priority. I'd also support opening up the thought exchange again, like Tim. I went back afterwards and there were several things added that I really liked, and it was just too late. So.
Kelly?
So I had technical difficulties. I experienced some people with this. So I didn't get to vote on this, but I would add to the second and third as far as if our current program, as far as the tax cap, if our current programs can be funded, and potentially lean towards the approaching that tax cap if there was unfunded, or there was this new needs. But it depends. Like I mean, we'd have to discuss it. I think if the community is adamant about something, I think it's our duty to put it up for a vote to them at some point if it's reasonable, because if they're the ones that are paying for it, if they are willing to pay the extra taxes for a turf field or whatever it may be, then maybe we should take a look at it. But I also think that as far as the thought exchanges, I think we need to really look back at what didn't get funded through our last attempt at the capital project, and make sure our schools are going to survive. I think that really should be the first priority as far as deteriorating buildings or keeping our kids warm, et cetera, et cetera. So I think everything has to be weighed, but I'm more on the side of, as far as this tax cap stuff, is to, if it's appropriate, to go for it. That's where I'm at.
So I know all of the PTAs at the elementary schools are doing fundraising for the playground. And knowing how much the playground equipment costs and how long it would take to fundraise to actually get new playground equipment, it will like never happen. I mean, it would take years and years. Their kids would be gone. So I know there was an idea floating around before about having a capital project tying in the playgrounds and the turf field together and putting it to the voters. I would be in support of that because that's the message that I'm getting from the community in regards to the turf field, in regards to the playground. We've seen fundraising happen for a long time, and like I said, I don't know when that would happen, so I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I would be comfortable with putting that as a separate capital project, putting it up for the voters to decide. And the other things for the regular operating budget, I know we had a list from the administrators, and the two that stood out to me, we already talked about the mental health clinic, and if the one at the middle school is already at capacity, considering one at the high school seems like would be a necessary step. And then also the E&L support, at, I think, all of the schools, or is it the high school? And split it, high school and between elementary schools as well?
High school, high school.
High school, okay. And I'll quickly read Barb's thoughts. I don't think she was able to log in. She said she would also like to explore the possibility of requiring a personal finance course for graduation. I think she talked to David and Lynn about that. And also an emphasis on coding as a language, and also expanding our foreign language or other languages such as sign language. And then, of course, implementing the later start time. I also would be, of course, in favor of supporting the later start time. To what extent we use the budget for that, I don't really know until we have a plan or have an idea in terms of numbers, but I think we're going to get an update that in the plan. So if we open up the thought exchange again, I know Gloria is also not here, and now that we've heard some more from the public, and you guys have some time to, I guess, think about what you've seen in the thought exchange, I guess we can start to prioritize a little bit from this big list of items. Other questions?
So I can send a note out when we reopen that, and if there's any special instructions. I don't know what they would be. I've never exactly reopened one of these before, but I think it can be done. Yeah, I'll let you know as and how long it will be open for.
Okay. All right, so next on the agenda, we have consent items. We have minutes of the November 19th, 2019 meeting. We have the CPSC and CSC recommendations, the financials, and the personnel action. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Sean, second. Judy? Any comments or questions? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, passes 7-0. Okay, next, information items, curriculum instruction. Dr. Singleton?
I just have one good news item tonight, and it is regarding an award recognizing one of our great physical education teachers, and this is coming from the Shape America Teacher of the Year program, which recognizes outstanding teachers in adapted physical education, school health education, dance education, and physical education at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. We want to extend congratulations to Guilderland High School physical education teacher Allison Relier, who was the 2018-19 New York State Teacher of the Year Award winner. Eligible for the Eastern District Teacher of the Year Award members must have received their state's Teacher of the Year Award. Allison will now be eligible for the National Teacher of the Year Award, where there are 4 other teachers who are in the running with her. So congratulations to Allison. It is very, very well deserved. She does a phenomenal job at our high school.
Thank you. Next, superintendent information, Dr. Wiles.
So my first item is about our progress on our school start time work. Yesterday, we had a follow-up meeting with School Bus Consulting. They are the group that we hired back in August to look at some of the options available to us for transportation around moving start times. You'll recall they met with us back in October. At the end of October, they presented 5 options. None of those options were really viable, either because of the number of additional buses they required or for the constraints they placed on the actual logistics of transporting children. So we called them the morning after that report and asked them to look at this more closely, and we gave them the added parameter that we can't add bus routes and bus drivers to this work because we can't cover the routes that we have. So it's not even the money piece so much as it is just the capacity to provide that. So we had 2 consultants with us yesterday, and about half of our task force was in the meeting, and we got 4 new options, all of them cost neutral. So there are kind of 2 big questions that we walk away from with their options. One of the options, well, let me say this. 3 of the 4 options required kind of innovative, creative, different approach to scheduling. And that would be to take one of our elementary buildings and split it off from the others in terms of the start time for that one elementary building. Our transportation challenges happen during the elementary runs. We have so many buses trying to get in so many places. So the idea was, if we could look at our overall plan and reduce that demand during the elementary times, we would kind of flatten out the demand across the 3 runs. So the options that we saw took one of our elementary buildings and paired it in one option with the high school and with another option with the middle school. One option that we thought was particularly promising had one elementary building moving to be the same timing as the high school with a start time of 8:15. The impact would be a 5-minute earlier start time for the other 4 elementary buildings. I know there was a big concern about flip-flopping high school and elementary and having elementary age students showing up at 7:15 for a 7:30 start. So this is a 5-minute adjustment for 4 elementary buildings. One elementary building would be a half an hour later, and at the same time as the high school. Students would not be on the same buses. They would be separate runs for elementary and high school. And at the middle school level, Farnsworth would start 15 minutes later. So now they start at 8:45. They would move to 9 o'clock. This actually reduced the number of runs we would need overall. And it eliminated that problem we have at the high school where the drop-off is 25 minutes before the start of school. It's a 10-minute window now. I know it sounds almost too good to be true. It is promising. I think one of the things that we will need some additional assistance with is by shifting all of this time, we're now entering a different traffic pattern in Gilderland. So if you think about our high school start time now, the buses pull into GHS before the worst of the traffic on Western Ave. This shifts this later. So we need to dig deeper into what the routing would look like, what the traffic would look like. But on paper and across the group, there were a lot of nodding heads. There was one option that did not have that idea of splitting one of the elementary buildings off. In that option, the start time for the high school would be 8 o'clock, so you would only gain 30 additional minutes. However, it couldn't correct that drop-off time issue, so students would need to be dropped off at 7:40 for an 8 o'clock start. So the sense I got from the committee was, is that worth it? Is that enough to make this change worth it? I'll put you on the spot, Rebecca, you were there.
I found it very appealing. It was much more of an optimistic environment than the previous meeting, where
Which was a lot of
positive information provided. It was really nice that I think all of them were budget neutral.
all of them were.
There was some suggestion of cost savings with the option that you're mentioning. And I think it is worthwhile to look at the fact of, should we make a change if the change is going to be so incremental that it may not result in any outcome that we want? You sent an email today about depression in students, and we know that decreased sleep is associated with depression and an increased risk of suicidality. That's why all public health agencies, there's really no debate about this, really support a later start time. And the later start time that all public health agencies support is 8:30 or later. So 8:15 would be a nice compromise to what we have now.
That sounds workable. Did they give a suggestion as to the school, or is it just left to our?
They gave a suggestion. I'm
Mhm.
gonna hold on to that
Okay.
for the moment.
Yeah.
But I can tell you how they selected the school. They
Okay.
looked at the number of runs and the average length of each run
Mhm.
and picked the school district with the shortest runs. Here's why. The idea is, so the 4 elementary buildings would go out pick up the students, drop them off at the other 4 buildings, and then some of those existing buses could do the elementary run for the 5th school. And if they're short runs, then you can squeeze it in. If it's a long run,
Okay,
you can't.
Yeah.
So it's not Altamont,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's just no way
yeah.
you could do that. So that's the thinking behind it. Now, Danielle wasn't at the meeting last night, but she sat with us in the afternoon with a consultant and looked at it. And, you know, her thinking is she would need to see it fleshed out more. The consultant shared with us that they're also working with Bethlehem. They're at the next step where they're actually doing the revised routing, because that's when you really see, you know, the reality of it. This is all computer-based on averages. You know, and we know what averages are. You know, your head's in the oven and your feet are in the freezer, and, you know, your
Average temperatures.
So I think there is some additional work to be done there. To me, the big question is there an appetite in our community to look at that idea of splitting off the start time of one elementary building in order to accomplish the later start time for the high school? Some of the, you know, we had a number of administrators in the group. There were questions about shared staff, because we do have teachers who work in multiple buildings, but we currently have teachers who work at the elementary and the middle school level. So it can be done. There was talk about aftercare and before care, athletics, you know, to start the day later for the high school, but it looked like about a 15-minute. We currently start practices at 3 o'clock. We could start them at 3:15. So it's not huge.
Unmanageable.
It's incremental. So that, to me, is the big question. Would the community be okay with the idea of one elementary building starting at a different time than the others?
Are they looking at this for next year still? Or is that too much of a push?
From a financial perspective, because there is knowing,
Yeah, I wasn't thinking finances, I guess.
well, that's, to me, that's the why you would need to decide by February. But
Oh.
I think at this point, the logistical piece of it might need, and the time to communicate with our community might need.
Yeah,
I don't know the answer to
because to
that.
change it too late in the year is not good.
You know, next year, in my mind, is next week.
Yeah.
This year is over. We're into next year already.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's enough time to, you know, gather the kind of input that we need, and then do the hard work of looking at those actual transportation routes. Because it is redoing the entire routing of the district,
Yeah.
except probably for the middle school would be the only thing that wouldn't be touched. So,
So I just wanted to ask you, so it's 4 out of 5 elementary schools to be 5 minutes later?
5 minutes early.
5 minutes earlier, sorry, and then the other one is 30 minutes later. Then Farmsworth is 30 minutes later.
15.
15.
Oh, sorry.
I know, I have the report, and
Okay.
we'll post it. I mean, there's no secrets there. We'll post it to the website, I can put it in the updated.
Okay.
It's just that it was just yesterday.
Okay, in the high school is that, this is all for 8:15 start.
So it's a 45-minute later
Yeah.
start.
Okay, thank you.
So start time is one thing, right? And then, but then like bus pickup time is the other. So as a parent, I'm less concerned about school start time, and I'm more concerned with bus pickup time. And so on the average, how does that change? I mean, are there times commensurate with the same swing that?
There are actually charts and graphs in here that
Okay.
show you when the first pickup is. Like, I'm just gonna, you can get it, it looks like this, and, you know, here's the start time, and then this is when the buses start picking up children, and the times are along the bottom. It'll be easier to see, I'll send it along to you. But it's, not, I mean, from the elementary perspective, it's not significant by more than a couple minutes.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking that, like you said, with the high school, the drop-off time to the start of class time, there's a gap in there. And so, you know, especially with the one elementary school moves to a 9 a.m. start,
No, 8:15.
or 8, sorry, half-hour swing. Okay.
So the other piece, and maybe I rushed by this, we've been struggling with the 7:05 drop-off at the high school and the 7:30 start. It's a 25-minute no man's land. The model that we're most interested in shrinks that to 10 minutes.
Which is reasonable, yeah.
So the students would arrive at 8:05.
And just refresh my memory, because I don't know off the top of my head, and maybe you don't either. In terms of the bargaining agreements, is it based on, are the school hours set in the agreement? Is it total number of hours worked per day? Do we have any issues? It's,
So it's not timed.
okay,
It's 7
it's
hours. and 45
7 hours,
minutes.
okay.
So at first blush, there were no, at least working hours issues, either for Gilderland Teachers Association or for the Bus Drivers Association, because the workday was in that 6-hour slot, which is also something we need to take.
Okay, thank you.
How many other schools in the area are, I mean, there are 4 schools that are considering, right? And is Queensberry the only one that's already changed?
There are 4 schools in earnest, and
Right.
they're more earnest.
Like Niskayuna and Bethlehem?
So, yes, Niskayuna, Bethlehem, East Greenbush is the
Okay.
other.
Okay.
They had a forum for their community a couple weeks ago before the holiday. Their model would simply flip elementary and high school, but the elementary would not be as early as the high school currently is. They start high school at 7:10 in East Greenbush, so they were going to a 7:30 start at elementary, and I think 8:15 or 8:10.
Okay. So athletics, we could probably balance out.
I think the tide might turn a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
Schenectady is already at 8:30, Troy is at 8:30.
Oh, okay.
So the colonies are still early. Shen is 7:45. I think
Okay.
it's,
And this takes into consideration private school runs and all of that? I mean, if schools are at different times, is that?
it did, but, later tonight, you'll be considering a proposal to contract out more
Right.
parochial and
Right,
private
saw
school
that.
because we
Yeah.
don't have drivers. So they're factored into this, but
Okay.
more and more we're needing to
Right.
go out for that. So it was
Which actually makes this more viable, right? Because we don't need those drivers.
Yeah, or actually, we could bring those runs up. I mean,
Yeah.
getting ahead of ourselves maybe
Yeah.
a little, but if we had room in our in-district runs and still 3 extra spots, it's much more cost-effective for us to run our own
Yeah.
transportation than to contract out. And it's just, we like to have our own drivers.
You mentioned issues at the high school in the morning. What are those issues?
Well, it's 25 minutes of,
Wandering.
there's nothing happening here. So there's a potential for,
Do we see a lot of disciplinary?
not really, but it is downtime, and it is a reason why so many students get driven to school, so they can have extra
Sleep
sleep.
time, yeah.
And then it creates the traffic jam that we have here. So I don't know if this will change that, but it's just 25 minutes of, we have our administrative team here, there's a handful of teachers, and lots of students arriving. But the sleepy factor helps us around discipline.
Do we have to look, or does somebody have to look at the traffic on West Street, because that would be the one kind of obstacle?
So this consulting group, and Neil, you can help me if I'm wrong here, doesn't have the capacity to project us into current traffic patterns. They suggested hiring someone else to do a traffic study. Okay, I think we've hired enough. So I think we do need to look at it.
There also was the concept of adaptability that they mentioned from their experiences. We all would adjust our schedules around the traffic patterns. So if we know we're getting delayed, we're going to leave a little earlier. People are doing that now. And if the traffic patterns were to change, they would adjust accordingly. in theory, that was their,
You know, if their work times allow.
yes, if you had the flexibility, or you might leave a little sooner, or could leave a little later, or as you found the ebb and flow of traffic in order to get where you needed to be on time.
It was a very positive, productive light at the end of the tunnel, kind of. So it was good.
The last meeting was
The opposite.
questioning what we're spending our money on type of meeting. So.
Okay, we have the next item too. So we had our fall recycling extravaganza on November 2nd at Farnsworth, and thanks to Ellen Gossett, we have some data compiled for you. This includes both the previous April event and then the recent November event, and the total number of pounds of recycled materials. And you can see we continue to do quite well. So I thank everyone who appeared and participated, and everyone who dropped off their stuff.
Yes, thank you. That was rescheduled, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it was a fortune, that's what.
Helps with the meeting process. That's all I have.
Thank you. Next, under action items, school business management action, Neil?
Okay, first item this evening, we just talked about is upcoming in this conversation is bid for private transportation services. So the recommendation is to award the contract for private transportation services to the Raja Group, which is the low bidder meeting specifications. So this was actually for them to take over the pickup and drop off of students at 4 private schools. And it's about 14 families that would be affected by this.
Can I have a motion to pass the private transportation contract service bid?
So moved.
Tim, second. Sean, questions? Comments? Tim?
I'm just curious, since we were just touching on it a little bit, if we did have the current staffing for it, I know it says we don't, but let's say things fell into place and we somehow could do it ourselves. So it's just roughly about 147,000. I rounded off a little. I know you're not supposed to do that, but what would the savings end up being if we had our own drivers doing that? Or can you cut that in half, or what would it be exactly?
Well, we're currently, up to this point, we're able to do that, so it's already built in. So the question is, without the staffing, now we have an additional, we're going to be saving those positions right now. We're not running the buses, we're not paying the drivers because we don't have the staff to do it. So now we're paying a contractor to do that work. So if we did have the staff, we'd be reversing back to the status quo.
So you'd save 140, you'd save the full amount?
There's a different, I don't know what the actual difference is, but now we would be paying drivers again and running the bus with the expenses that go along with that. So it's not a pure, there is a cost for the drivers and a cost for operating the bus on a daily basis.
Okay.
We're foregoing that, we're paying a contractor, so if we were to reduce it back, eliminate that and go back to having it ourselves, then we would reduce the private cost, but pick up an additional cost for employing our staff and operating the bus again.
So it's fair to say by not going private, there's significant savings?
Right, we would prefer to do this with our own staff. It would be cheaper for us to do it that way. We just don't have the bodies right now to do that.
Thanks.
Neil, Danielle mentioned that we've maximized, right, the outside contractors for these bus routes. Does this fall within that?
I'm sorry, we what?
She said that when we got the budget input from the administrators, that we've maximized our outside contractors.
Yeah, so we currently have a number of outside contractors. So we've been in this process of transitioning from being able to do all of our routes in district and out of district with our own staff, but as the driver shortage has progressed, we've been forced over time to more and more look at contracting out. So this is kind of the continuing evolution.
Okay.
3 drivers retiring between Thanksgiving and the end of this month. Got a couple in training, but that's it. So we've got 1 daily sub. All of our subs are going to move to those routes. We're down to 1 daily sub again, and then a couple people in the pipeline who may or may not get their license, who may or may not choose to ultimately decide to become a dress driver for Guilderland. And then we have some medical leaves that we know of as well. So we know we have the personnel shortage. and we need to make sure we can accommodate the needs of students, so.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Neil? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passes 7-0.
Next is a resolution to accept a donation of a drum set from teacher Lori Lima.
Can I have a motion to accept the donation? Judy, second Rebecca. Questions or comments? Besides, thank you. No, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passes 7-0. Next, superintendent action, Dr. Wiles?
I don't have anything tonight.
Oh, right, sorry. Next, board present action. So we have a list of policies to adopt here. I know Barb is not here, but if there's anybody in the policy committee that wants to share, can I have a motion to pass the policies that are listed A through G? Sean, second Tim. Questions or comments? No? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passes 7-0. Next, board committee reports. First, we'll have audit.
So we met on November 20th at FMS. We're meeting again bright and early tomorrow because we haven't had enough of each other tonight. So we're going to be interviewing 3 firms for audit services. I was also elected chair. I guess probably that's why I'm the one talking. So thanks, Tim, for that nomination.
You're welcome.
So we'll do that. We've also been, last meeting talked about areas of focus for internal audit. And so we went over the internal claims report, and so we'll report back on the selection of a firm shortly. And I guess we'll tell you that in 2020. Stay tuned.
Thank you. Next, communications.
We met the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, which I guess would be the 26th. We discussed some of the emails that we had received regarding the math curriculum, different ways that maybe we could get the word out about curriculum changes. And then we spent a lengthy discussion around the results of some of the thought exchanges that had been done at the middle school and high school. I believe the query was, I feel valued when ... And then you know how thought exchange works now. So the middle school had some nice thoughts to share. The high school was a lot of sarcasm, really. They used the opportunity when we asked about when you feel valued to tell us when they didn't feel valued. I've already mentioned briefly a lot of their concerns about the state of the buildings. Marie mentioned at our last meeting about their complaints about eSchool Data, the new grading software. I also saw comments like, I feel valued when the teacher doesn't confuse me with other Asian students, which implies that some teachers are confusing our Asian students. So there were a few good comments in there, but by and large, there's obviously a lot of work to be done at the high school. At my, if I may, at the luncheon that I went to last Friday, I mentioned this to another board member, and they said to me, well, it kind of tells you about what they think of who's listening. If they're given sarcastic answers, they probably think it's a sarcastic question. And so, like I said, there's a lot of work to be done in there, I think. So.
I was going to say something about that, but I guess when I remember it. Next, business practices.
Business practices will be meeting a week from tomorrow, the 18th, at 8 o'clock. We will be talking about, big surprise, the athletic fields, the turf fields. I think that we're going to have some of the community members who are so concerned about it will be there. And we also have to discuss further exemptions for the military veterans in the community.
Judy, you said that's next Wednesday at 4 at district office?
It's, yeah,
Okay.
but I think is it at 4? I thought it was at 8.
4 o'clock.
Oh, okay, sorry.
That's good. I wanted to attend, so I put it in my calendar, I wasn't sure.
Oh, okay, all right.
And last, policy? Barb is the chair for that, right?
We have policy on December 18th at 8 in the morning.
Oh, so we don't have business practices at 8 in the morning.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next, we have board issues, ideas, and sharing, or I'm sorry, public comment number 2. Linda, we don't have anybody. Okay, so next, board issues, ideas, and sharing. I guess I'll mention this before I forget. I remember last year we used to get the paper copy, I think, of the journal from the high school, and I don't know if that's something we could still get. I read like a recent article in there that students had written about teacher diversity. I thought it was really good. And then I remembered, oh, we used to get copies of that. I think Aaron used to give it to, I'm not sure, but we used to get them, I think, at the board meetings.
Yeah, we can get
Yeah, just with our
Because
packets.
It's kind of helpful to read like what students are writing about. Oh, and then the second thing is, do we have a meeting scheduled with the folks who contacted us about the social studies curriculum?
From the
I forgot their name.
Underground Railroad Project,
Yes.
Paul and Mary Liz.
Yes, I couldn't remember their names.
I'll tell you the names, but I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, I know, we do? Okay.
Yeah.
It's on the 19th, I think, or 18th?
It's on the 19th at 4 o'clock.
Okay, so that is a thing. It was on my calendar, I wasn't sure, so, okay, thank you. Any other board sharing? Judy?
Just want to say that I went to the Focus Luncheon, which is a wonderful, wonderful event, if you could ever go. It just is very heartwarming to see these kids. They stand up and they talk about what they've done. It's a day of community service, which is good. But then they talk about what the Focus program means to them. And it's very emotional and very moving, and you see how lucky we are to have such a vibrant, strong program for these students. And it's just wonderful to be around the kids at a situation like that.
Any other? Ben?
I had the great privilege of as I mentioned, attending a NISBA roundtable with Chancellor Rosa and Acting Commissioner Tahoe last Friday on the 6th. The Chancellor and the Commissioner stuck around for about the first hour and a half. We discussed teacher diversity. State Ed's been instructed to put together a report for the legislature about diversity in the educator workforce. And they discovered some pretty significant items of concern. A gentleman I was sitting next to is part of a BOCES with 23 districts. His is the only district of those 23 with teachers of color, and he has 1. 200 districts statewide have 0 teachers of color. In the Capital Region BOCES, 3% of educators are people of color. And so, obviously, Chancellor Rosa, being a woman of color herself, this is a very important issue for her, for the Board of Regents as a whole. Another board member that was there mentioned that in his district there's not a lot of minority students, but there are a lot of poor students, and that him being a minority, the poor students feel like they can connect with him better. So even for districts that are pretty homogenous culturally, socioeconomically, there's still benefits to having people who look different. We also discussed school safety and the climate of our schools. The U.S. Secret Service recently released a report analyzing school attacks for the period between 2008 and 2017. And one of the major findings was that there's not a whole lot of accurate predictors of who the individual that's going to attack the school is going to be. We have this image in our head of Adam Lanza with his loner lifestyle and his garbage bags over the windows of his bedroom and writing horrible things in journals. But in fact, many school attackers are members of sports teams, prom kings, have friends, have teacher relationships with teachers. I mentioned Gabby Cusado, again, someone who was on sports teams, had friends, big family, and suggested that since we can't accurately find the students that we need to be paying more attention to, it becomes ever more important to focus on the school climate in general. Chancellor Rosa and Commissioner Tahoe left after an hour and a half. They had more meetings to go to, but the rest of us stuck around. We discussed school start time. We talked about high school representatives. Over half the board members in attendance had boards with high school representatives on them or assisting them on steering committees, and they found them helpful. One individual said he had 3 student representatives on his board. And we also talked about, we had an interesting discussion, I thought, about board activism. One district passed a resolution condemning racism in the community after some racist acts were committed. It wasn't a policy, it wasn't a contract, it was just a statement of support for diversity and a condemnation of intolerance. And others talked about different ways that the board gets involved with the schools, forming committees that are authorized to send people into the schools to talk to students and gather feedback and act as an agent of the board to get more involved with what's going on in the district, which was all very interesting. In all, it was just an incredible afternoon. I think the program was a little over 3 hours, and it flew by. It was very encouraging.
Thank you. I'll just share one tidbit. I was at St. Lawrence University for a conference on trauma and poverty because I'm working on a grant related to high-need schools and that topic. And at my table was the New York Regent, Bev Oedeker.
Oh, yeah?
And so, when we introduced ourselves, and she, finally remembers Gilderland because of, is it, no?
Jonah.
Jonah, yep. So I just thought that was nice to share.
Yes, we're on her map.
Yeah, she was so impressed by him, so that was cool. Any other board sharing ideas or suggestions? No? Okay, so I need a motion to enter into executive session to discuss the following matters. To discuss matters leading to the potential tenure appointment of a particular person. To discuss the employment history of particular persons and matters leading to potential discipline or dismissal. And to discuss issues pertaining to negotiations with district office confidential personnel. A motion, Judy. Second. Kelly? Comments? All in favor? Aye, passes 7-0. Thank you. Sorry, Maria, I totally forgot that.
What's that?
When I was on